70 years ago, Benidorm was a fishing village of about 2,700 people, with no reliable running water and just 102 hotel rooms. Today, more than 3 million visitors arrive every year, roughly 40 times the number of people who live there. They come to a wall of towers rising straight out of the Mediterranean, more than 25 of them over 100 meters tall, crowned by the tallest hotel in Europe. A place that could barely water its own people built one of the densest skylines on Earth in a single lifetime. They call it the Manhattan of the Mediterranean. The Spanish have a blunter name for it, Benidorm. By the measure most often quoted, no city anywhere packs more high-rise towers around each of its residents, and the University of Alicante, which studied the place closely, called it plainly the European city with the highest density of residential skyscrapers. All of it grew out of a village so poor it could not reliably turn on a tap. And the strangest part is what kept happening afterwards. The very thing that made Benidorm work, cramming a small nation of sunseekers onto two curving beaches, is the same thing that has nearly finished it more than once. It ran dry in a drought that lasted 6 years. It was left with a vast half-built tower standing empty against the sky. Each of those crises could have finished Benidorm for good. Instead, every one of them was followed by another wave of building. None of it was supposed to happen here. Benidorm sits on the Costa Blanca, the white coast of eastern Spain, a little north of the city of Alicante. Its whole geography is two beaches divided by a rocky headland where the old town still stands. To the east lies the Playa de Levante, named for the sunrise. To the west lies the Playa de Poniente, named for the sunset. Between them runs some 6 kilometers of pale sand facing a warm, shallow sea. It is, on paper, the perfect place for a holiday. For most of its history, almost nobody came. For centuries, the town lived off the water in the other sense. Its men fished, and above all, they fished for tuna, using an ancient trap called the almadraba, a maze of nets strung out from the shore to funnel the great migrating fish into a killing chamber. When the season was good, it fed the town. When it was bad, there was little else. It was hard, seasonal, dangerous money, and by the middle of the 20th century it was drying up. In 1952, the town's almadraba closed for good, and with it went the single thing the village had always done to feed itself. What remained was a scattering of craftspeople and small traders on a coast that had just lost its living. The place at that moment was easy to overlook. A few thousand people, a shuttered fishery, low houses on a dry hillside, and a water supply so unreliable that summers were a slow negotiation with thirst. The beaches were perfect. The problem was that a resort needs water it can count on, and Benidorm had never had it. There was a reason nobody had built the obvious hotels on the obvious sand. Then, at the very end of 1950, the town got a new mayor. His name was Pedro Zaragoza Orts. He was 28 years old, born in Benidorm, and he had one idea that never left him. He looked at those empty beaches and the emptying village, and he decided that Benidorm would live or die on sunshine sold to foreigners. Everything he did for the next 16 years bent toward that single plan. His first problem was the water, and he solved it the way he solved most things, by refusing to accept the obvious limit. The nearby Amadoreo Reservoir was brought into use in the early 1950s. By 1960, the town had piped water arriving from a well inland at Rabassa, the first time Benidorm could promise a supply that did not run out with the summer. In the fountain in the town's Elche Park, Zaragoza had a stone set with a line that reads, roughly, that one can also live on illusion. It was a strange motto to carve over a water supply. He meant it plainly. Before he sold anyone a dream, he had spent his first years in office making sure the town had water that would not run out. His second problem was stranger, and it is the part of the story that made him famous. This was Spain under Francisco Franco, a Catholic dictatorship where the church policed the beaches, and a woman in a two-piece swimsuit could be fined, cautioned, or publicly shamed. Zaragoza understood that the Northern Europeans he wanted, the Scandinavians and the British, would not travel 1,000 miles to cover up. So, in the early 1950s, he did something no other mayor in Spain would touch. He issued a municipal order permitting the bikini on Benidorm's beaches, and he threatened to fine anyone who insulted a woman for wearing one. In the Spain of that decade, it was an extraordinary thing for a small-town mayor to put in writing. The reaction, as the story is told, was immediate and furious. The Archbishop of Valencia is said to have moved to have Zaragoza excommunicated, cast out of the church, a ruinous thing for a public man in Franco's Spain. Another local bishop, so the accounts go, threatened to put up roadside signs warning that the souls of the town were bound for hell, and this is where Benidorm's founding legend takes over. As Zaragoza later told it, he climbed onto a Vespa scooter one morning in 1953 and rode the whole way to Madrid, some 460 kilometres, 8 or 9 hours on a small buzzing engine, to plead his case in person with the dictator himself. The story says Franco, amused by the small, round, determined man with motor oil on his trousers, took his side and the bikini stayed. It is a wonderful story. It is also, when you go looking for the documents, almost impossible to pin down. The historian Patricia Hertel, who examined the record closely, found no paperwork for the excommunication, no confirmed meeting with Franco in those years, and no surviving copy of the written bikini order itself. The tale comes mostly from Zaragoza's own retellings, which shifted over the decades, and one scholar suspects he may have blended the bikini fight with a separate quarrel over building permits. What can be said for certain is quieter and, in its way, more impressive. The bikini did become a lasting symbol of the town, and Benidorm did open its beaches years before the rest of Franco's Spain caught up. The story was even turned into an award-winning short film decades later, a sign of how fondly the town now holds it. True or not in its details, it captures something real about how the place made its name. Benidorm sold a kind of freedom the rest of Franco's Spain would not allow at a moment when word of such things travelled fast among sun-starved northerners. The real engine of the town's rise came 3 years later, and it had nothing to do with a scooter. It was a planning document that hardly anyone outside Benidorm has ever heard of. In 1956, Zaragoza pushed through a general development plan for Benidorm, and it is the single most important document in this whole story. Planning rules usually exist to hold buildings down. His did close to the opposite. The plan let developers build high, but it forced them to leave open, green, sunlit space around every tower they raised. No building could crowd its neighbour. Each one had to sit in its own pool of air and light. The space requirement had a consequence nobody at the time seems to have fully grasped. Once every tower had to stand clear of its neighbours, the only way to house more visitors on the same strip of coast was to build higher and then higher again. The rule written to guarantee light and air is the reason Benidorm has a skyline at all. A few years later, in 1963, a further change in the regulations opened the door to genuine high-rise building, and the ceiling on the town's ambition came off completely. The town was now a machine with a purpose, and Zaragoza spent the rest of his time as mayor advertising it to the north. He toured Europe in person, selling Benidorm's sun. He left branches of flowering Spanish almond in the department stores of Stockholm in the depths of the Swedish winter, a living advertisement for a warmer world. He sent local wine to the British Queen Mother. He was marketing a whole town to foreign strangers before most places had understood that a town could be marketed at all. The results showed up in the ledgers. The municipal budget, a matter of a few tens of thousands of pesetas when he took office, had climbed into the millions by the time he left, and the timing was close to perfect. In April 1967, the airport at Alicante opened, and the package holiday, that great post-war British invention of flight, hotel and airport transfer, sold together for a single low price, suddenly had somewhere cheap and sunny to point at. For the first time, an ordinary family from a rainy northern town could afford a fortnight in the Mediterranean sun. The planes came. The northerners came, pale and delighted, straight off the tarmac and onto the Levante beach, and the concrete began to climb. For the British in particular, Benidorm became something genuinely new in the world, a foreign holiday within reach of an ordinary wage. Before the package deal, the Mediterranean had belonged mostly to the wealthy. After it, a factory worker from the north of England could lie on the same warm sand for a week for the price of a few shifts. Benidorm did not invent the package holiday, but it became its capital, the place the whole model seemed to have been built around. The town sold sunshine by the plane load, and a whole generation of Britons took their first ever flight in order to reach it. The first true tower went up in 1969. It was called Costa Blanca, 94 metres of it, around 30 floors, and it was designed by an architect named Juan Guardiola Gaia, who would go on to draw more than 30 of Benidorm's high-rises. Blanca stood by itself at first, a strange lone finger of a building over a low town. It did not stand alone for long. Within a generation, the whole seafront was a forest of them. In 1985, the Torre Levante became the first building in the town to break past 30 floors and rise beyond 120 metres. And by then, a single new tower was no longer news at all. Count only the true skyscrapers, the ones above 100 metres, and the tally sits somewhere between 25 and 30, depending on where you draw the line. Count every high-rise building of a dozen stories or more, and the number runs into the hundreds. The scale of what happened in those years is easiest to see in the number of beds. In 1950, Benidorm could house around 700 visitors. By 1956, the year of the plan, that had risen to 3,500. By 1963, it was 52,000. In 13 years, the town's capacity to hold tourists had multiplied more than 70 times over. The village that had once struggled to water a few thousand of its own was now filling and emptying like a tide. Tens of thousands arriving, tens of thousands leaving, week after week, through every summer. To grasp what that meant on the ground, picture the skyline filling in almost year by year. Through the 1970s and the 1980s, cranes were a permanent feature of the front. A tower would rise, and beside it another, and then a third, each one taller and thinner than the last, as the engineers learned what the ground and the plan would allow. A place that a generation earlier had counted its buildings in dozens was now counting them in hundreds, and the low white village on the headland was all but swallowed by the concrete rising around it. Whole streets of high rises went up on land that had grown almonds and carob trees within living memory. There was no ancient centre to build around and no grand old quarter to protect, and so Benidorm did something almost no European town of its age ever gets the chance to do. It built itself again from nothing, straight upward on open ground in the space of about 30 years. By the turn of the century, the ambition had gone vertical in the most literal sense. In 2002, Benidorm opened the Grand Hotel Bali, 186 metres tall, or 210 if you count the mast, 52 floors, 776 rooms in a single enormous slab of a building. For a few years it was the tallest building in the whole of Spain, taller even than the office towers of Madrid, until the capital finally overtook it. But it remained, and remains to this day, the tallest hotel in all of Europe. From its upper floors, the coast curves away for miles. From the beach below, it looks less like a hotel than a cliff someone decided to rent out by the night. What Benidorm worked out, in the end, was a formula, and the formula did not stay in one town. Cheap flights, packed towers and a warm beach, sunshine sold at industrial scale to the working families of Northern Europe, became the template for holiday coasts everywhere. The Costa Blanca and the Costa del Sol filled with imitations, and versions of the idea spread around the Mediterranean and far beyond it. But none of them ever matched the scale of the original. Benidorm had simply done it first, and at a greater scale than anywhere that followed. And yet a town built this tightly around a single idea, sun sold to foreigners, carries a hidden fault line, and Benidorm was about to discover exactly where its own ran. And almost all of it, from the very start, was built for one customer above every other, the British. Benidorm was engineered from its plumbing to its planning for the Northern European package tourist, and no nation took to it quite like Britain. For decades, British holidaymakers have made up the single largest share of the visitors. More than 800,000 of them passed through Alicante Airport, bound for the town, in a single year. Even now, the pull has not loosened. In 2025, guests from the United Kingdom accounted for more than 42% of all hotel stays in Benidorm, edging back ahead of Spanish visitors for the first time in years, the share having run as high as 46% in the years before. If you have ever stood in a British bar in Spain, a full English breakfast under a Union flag at 10 in the morning, you have stood inside the world Benidorm built. The town became so completely a fixture of British life that it turned into television. In 2007, the broadcaster ITV launched a comedy called Simply Benidorm, set in a fictional all-inclusive resort and filmed in a working hotel on the front. It ran for 10 series, right through to 2018, and for more than a decade it carried the town's package holiday world, the pools and the bars and the sunburn and the endless full English breakfasts, straight into millions of British living rooms. Most of the people watching had either already been or were half planning to go. That reliance matters because it cuts both ways. A town this good at giving one country exactly what it wants is a town that rises and falls with that country's fortunes. And more than once, Benidorm's dependence on the very tourists it was built for has left it dangerously exposed. Twice now, the machine has nearly seized up entirely. The first crisis had nothing to do with money. It came, of all things, from a shortage of water. For all of Zaragossa's early plumbing, Benidorm was always a thirsty town in a dry corner of Spain. And in 1978, the rain simply stopped. The drought that followed ran for 6 years, and at its worst, the resort could not supply the water its own success demanded. In the peak of summer, with the hotels full to the roof, Benidorm was reduced to bringing fresh water in from outside. Tanker lorries ran in long convoys along the coast road, and ships carried water in by sea, keeping the pools filled and the taps running through the hottest weeks of the year. It was the town's oldest weakness laid bare at the very height of its success, a city of towers still living underneath, with the same shortage the fishing village had known all along. Out of that crisis came the fix that still holds. The towns of the region banded together into a shared water authority for the Marina Baixa, pooling reservoirs and supplies so that no single dry year could strand the whole coast again. Benidorm had learned the hard way to engineer around the limit that should have stopped it before it ever began. The underlying thirst never really went away. The region simply built the machinery to manage it, and the towers kept rising. The second near disaster was money, and it left a scar you can still see on the skyline. In the middle of the 2000s, with Spanish property prices soaring, developers announced a tower that would outdo everything before it. It was called In Tempo, a vast structure of 2 towers leaning together and joined near the top by a huge crown, shaped from a distance like a giant capital letter M with a diamond set into it. The design was unveiled in 2006. It was meant to be the proud new face of the city. For years it became something else entirely. Construction began, and then in 2008 the global financial crisis tore through Spain, and Benidorm's building boom went with it. The money behind In Tempo evaporated. A loan of €92 million went bad. The original developer collapsed into bankruptcy, and the tower, only part finished, was simply abandoned. A giant concrete skeleton standing over the beach, wrapped in silence for years. The building attracted its own legend, in the way Benidorm always does. A story spread around the world that the developers, in their haste, had forgotten to design a lift for a tower of 47 floors, leaving future residents to climb. It made headlines everywhere. It was also not really true. The building did have its lift shafts running its full height. The real story was messier and more ordinary, a tale of overreach and bad debt, and a country's economy dropping out from under a project far too big for its moment. For a long time it looked as though In Tempo might stand unfinished forever, the emblem of a town that had finally reached too high. It did not. An international investment firm bought the wreck, poured in the money to complete it, and in 2021, more than a decade after the first plans were drawn, In Tempo was finally finished. At just over 202 metres, it is now the tallest building in Benidorm, and the 5th tallest in all of Spain. For years it had been the town's great embarrassment. Now it was simply the tallest thing on the coast. Walk the seafront today, and the arithmetic of the place is staggering. Something like 77,000 people are registered as living in Benidorm. On the busiest days of the summer, that number swells past 360,000, as it did on a single August day in 2023, when residents and visitors together packed the 2 beaches. Across the year, over 3 million people pass through, close to 60% of them from abroad, and they leave behind them more than 16 million overnight stays. The town now runs on the order of 130 hotels, holding close to 44,000 rooms between them, and in a good year, those rooms sit more than 8 in 10 full. The visitor numbers have not just held, but grown, from close to 2.8 million in 2024 to past the 3 million mark the year after, a record on top of a record. There is nothing else quite like it on the European coast, a small town wearing the skyline of a great city. The old fishing village has not entirely vanished. The rocky headland between the two beaches still carries the tight streets of the original town, and a viewpoint there looks out over the same sea the tuna boats once worked. But the eye is always dragged upward, to the Grand Hotel Bali still standing tallest among the hotels, to Intempo's Great Crown at the northern end, to the packed ranks of white towers that turn gold at sunset over the Poniente sand. And the man who set it all in motion is remembered everywhere in it. Pedro Zaragoza died in 2008, the same year the crisis struck the tower he would never see finished. The town gave his name to a broad avenue, raised a monument to him, and marked the 100th anniversary of his birth with a full year of celebrations. The University of Alicante endowed a chair in his name. Whatever the real truth of the Vespa and the dictator, the place he conjured out of a dry hillside is the most solid monument any mayor could ask for. Benidorm is not finished climbing either. Plans have been drawn for a new tower on the front, projected at around 230 metres and 64 floors, which, if it is built, would become the tallest residential building in all of Europe, expected toward the end of this decade. The town that once could not water 2,000 people has never learned how to stop reaching higher. There is a photograph, taken from the sea, that has become the standard image of Benidorm, a single wall of towers standing where a fishing village once dried its nets. It is easy to read that skyline as pure excess, and plenty of people do, but knowing where it came from changes the way it looks. This was a place with no water, no work, and no obvious reason for anyone to visit, and it built one of the tallest, densest coastlines in Europe anyway. Towers can be raised almost anywhere there is money and nerve. What makes Benidorm improbable is the ground it started from, a dry hillside with a closed fishery and a few thousand thirsty people. It rose regardless, through drought and financial ruin and its own repeated overreach, climbing higher every time the ground seemed to give way beneath it. A poor village on a thirsty coast talked the sun into paying its bills, and never once looked back down. If a rise this unlikely is your kind of story, there is another one waiting on your screen right now that I think you will like just as much. Go ahead and click it.